suffer yours no longer. Must I spell it out for you, Branded? No one is listening. No one at all! Come, little lamb, to the slaughter with you.
Final Fantasy XVI is, without a shadow of doubt, the most rich, complete, and coherent a new mainline Final Fantasy game has been from the get-go in a long time. Final Fantasy XV was an absolute mess, and even with its post-launch DLC, it never managed to get that level of quality that you'd expect to see from the franchise. So, yes, the wait for the franchise to truly return to form has been a long one, but if you ever needed evidence of patience being rewarded in spades, this game would be it. Final Fantasy XVI is an incredible experience, and it flies ridiculously high in so much of what it does. The combat, the music, the story, the world building. A few aspects of the game do falter, whether it's the level design, which tends to be a bit too linear more often than not, or the shallow RPG mechanics, but this grittier, more mature take on the long-running franchise feels like a significant step forward for it, while still feeling like what you'd want from a Final Fantasy game to feel like, though that bit admittedly remains nebulous as ever. What stands out in 16 right off the bat is how fun its combat is. It's been a long time since Final Fantasy has been fully turn-based, but installments like 15 have incorporated command-based elements in their combat systems. 16 ditches that aspect entirely, instead adopting a fully real-time, pure action-driven approach to craft a combat system that much more closely resembles what you'd expect to see in a character action game. It's obviously a new direction for the series, but Final Fantasy XVI takes that first step with such confidence it feels like its 100th. The combat starts out fairly simple and straightforward, but even in the early hours, the loop of hacking and slashing, dodging and parrying, and using air combos and abilities remains fun and satisfying, thanks in large part to its immediacy and its fast-paced nature. The more you play though, the deeper and more complex the combat system becomes. Not only are you constantly upgrading your abilities and naturally learning new tricks during the course of fights, you also frequently add new iconic powers to your arsenal, with each set coming with its own unique elemental properties and moves that tend to differ significantly from anything else that you might have in your toolset. You get a surprising level of control over what you want your combat style to be. It's like multiple different kinds of character action games all rolled into one experience. And what makes the system really sing is how easily and seamlessly it is to quickly swap between different iconic abilities during combat. Mixing and matching on the fly and stringing together combos of flashy, bombastic attacks to pulverize your foes never ever gets boring.
You know what to do, baby.
And there's so much flash here. Final Fantasy XVI is all about the spectacle and takes a lot of pride in how it pulls that off. The core of the story always remains rooted in personal arcs, and yet the game keeps finding ways to escalate things to a new level where you're going to be picking your jaw off the floor every time. The boss fights and set-piece moments on offer here are unlike anything y'all have seen. No adjective seems to do justice to just what they are. It's clear that the development team has taken a massive amount of influence from the older God of War games and their ridiculous sense of scale, because words like epic and massive can't begin to describe the things that you see on the screen here, and how you engage and interact with them. Final Fantasy XVI's focus on fast-paced action comes at a cost though, because the actual RPG side of the experience feels kinda lackluster. You can equip accessories in a limited amount of slots, you routinely buy new gear to upgrade your loadout, and you spend ability points on upgrades after leveling up, but that's just pretty much it. It's a disappointingly shallow execution of RPG systems, and it feels even more of a letdown because this is, after all, a Final Fantasy game, a series that has always prided itself on constantly being in the upper echelons of the genre. The versatility and complexity of this incredible combat system does go a long way towards making up for the deficiencies, but they are noticeable deficiencies nonetheless. An area where you'll find little to no issues, on the other hand, is the story. I always have high expectations from Final Fantasy stories, as do many others, but I don't think I've been this enraptured by the tale being told in an FF game for a long time. I'm a massive fan of its more mature tone, not only because it allows the game to let loose when it needs to, rather than having to place restrictions on itself in hopes of avoiding that M rating, but also because it doesn't go overboard with those elements. Final Fantasy XVI takes a measured approach in its execution of a grittier story, and it's much more impactful for that. The story itself, meanwhile, is equally impressive, and that's thanks in large part to the incredible world building on display here. The world of Valisthea is vast and complex, and learning about its different kingdoms and their cultures, the many conflicts that plague the land, and the political conflicts that brew in every corner is among the game's very best highlights. The game also deserves a lot of credit for, once again, the measured and incredibly coherent approach that it takes in doling out this information. Rather than relying on lengthy exposition dumps, it drips out new details on its world bit by bit, which helps it strike the perfect balance between ensuring you always have questions that you want answers to, and that you never feel like you're lost in the story. You're always thoroughly immersed in Final Fantasy XVI's fantastical reality, thanks to the excellent job it does of authentically building up and fleshing out its world. It's worth bringing up that Final Fantasy XVI does have a bit of a slow beginning, the prologue notwithstanding. The prologue is a bombastic, riveting affair that does an excellent job of pulling you in the game's first couple of hours, but once it's done, the pace slows down significantly. From that point, the game takes about 6 to 8 hours before it really gets going again. But when it does so suddenly, and it just never lets up. And once you hit that point, the memory of the slow beginning starts getting rather foggy very quickly. Where Final Fantasy XVI ranks among the best that the series has ever had to offer is a question we're all going to be asking ourselves and each other over the months and years to come. But though it's too early yet to firmly nail down a place for it in that list, one thing I can say very confidently is that it's surely going to be close to the top, at the very least. Hey, did you know that we at Gaming Bolt upload new videos every day? Stick around, drop a like, subscribe, and hit that bell, and let us know what kind of content you'd like to see in the future with a comment below.